Step mashing in creating a moonshine mash. Moonshine Life Group. By J.B. Wagonmaker. Moonshine is a homemade distilled spirit that can be made from various ingredients, such as corn, sugar, fruit, or malt. The quality and flavor of moonshine depend largely on the mashing process, which involves the conversion of starches into fermentable sugars by enzymes. One of the methods of mashing is step mashing, which involves heating the mash at different temperature steps to activate different enzymes. In this article, E will explain the benefits and drawbacks of step mashing, the types of enzymes involved, and the typical step mash schedules for moonshine. What is step mashing and why do it? Step mashing or multi-rest mashing is the process of combining the malt or grains with water at varying temperature steps, usually starting from a low temperature and gradually increasing to a high temperature. The purpose of step mashing is to optimize the enzyme activity and the starch conversion in the mash, as well as to control the body and mouthfeel of the final product. Step mashing can also help to break down complex proteins and carbohydrates that can cause haze, cloudiness, or off flavors in the moonshine. Step mashing can have several advantages over single infusion mashing, which is the process of combining the malt or grains with water at a single temperature, usually around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 66 degrees Celsius. Some of the benefits of step mashing are: it can increase the efficiency and yield of the mash, as more starches are converted into sugars. It can improve the clarity and stability of the moonshine, as less proteins and carbohydrates remain in the mash. It can enhance the flavor and aroma of the moonshine, as more desirable compounds are produced by the enzymes. It can adjust the body and mouthfeel of the moonshine, as the ratio of fermentable and unfermentable sugars can be manipulated by the temperature steps. However, step mashing also has some drawbacks, such as: it can be more time-consuming and labor-intensive, as the mash needs to be heated and stirred at each step. It can be more difficult and complicated, as the mash temperature and volume need to be calculated and monitored carefully. It can be unnecessary or counterproductive, as modern malts are already well modified and can be mashed at a single temperature without compromising the quality. What enzymes are involved in step mashing? Enzymes are biological catalysts that facilitate chemical reactions. In the context of mashing, enzymes are responsible for breaking down the starches, proteins, and carbohydrates in the malt or grains into simpler and smaller molecules, such as sugars, amino acids, and alcohols. Enzymes are sensitive to temperature and pH, and each enzyme has an optimal range where it is most active and effective. The most common enzymes involved in step mashing are: beta-glucanase. This enzyme breaks down beta-glucans, which are complex carbohydrates that can cause viscosity and gumminess in the mash. Beta-glucanase is active at a temperature range of 95 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 to 45 degrees Celsius. 1. Protease. This enzyme breaks down proteins, which are long chains of amino acids that can cause haze and cloudiness in the moonshine. Protease is active at a temperature range of 113 to 131 degrees Fahrenheit, 45 to 55 degrees Celsius. Beta-amylase. This enzyme breaks down starches, which are long chains of glucose molecules, into maltose, which is a simple sugar that can be easily fermented by yeast. Beta-amylase is active at a temperature range of 131 to 149 degrees Fahrenheit, 55 to 65 degrees Celsius. Alpha-amylase. This enzyme breaks down starches into various sugars, such as glucose, maltose, and maltotriose, which can be fermented by yeast. Alpha-amylase is active at a temperature range of 149 to 167 degrees Fahrenheit, 65 to 75 degrees Celsius. What are the typical step mash schedules for moonshine? The step mash schedule is the sequence and duration of the temperature steps in the mashing process. The step mash schedule can vary depending on the type and quality of the ingredients, the desired characteristics of the moonshine, and the personal preference of the moonshiner. However, Some general guidelines and examples of step mash schedules are: light-bodied moonshine. This is a moonshine that has a thin and dry mouthfeel, a high alcohol content, and a subtle flavor. A light-bodied moonshine can be achieved by using a high proportion of sugar or corn, and by mashing at a low temperature for a long time to produce more fermentable sugars. A possible step mash schedule for a light-bodied moonshine is 113 degrees Fahrenheit, 45 degrees Celsius, for 15 minutes to activate beta-glucanase and reduce viscosity. 131 degrees Fahrenheit, 55 degrees Celsius, for 15 minutes to activate protease and reduce haze. 145 degrees Fahrenheit, 63 degrees Celsius, for 60 minutes to activate beta-amylase and produce maltose. 167 degrees Fahrenheit, 75 degrees Celsius, for 10 minutes to activate alpha-amylase and produce other sugars. Medium-bodied moonshine. This is a moonshine that has a balanced and smooth mouthfeel, a moderate alcohol content, and a rich flavor. A medium-bodied moonshine can be achieved by using a moderate proportion of sugar or corn, and by mashing at a medium temperature for a medium time to produce a mix of fermentable and unfermentable sugars. A possible step mash schedule for a medium-bodied moonshine is 113 degrees Fahrenheit, 45 degrees Celsius, for 15 minutes to activate beta-glucanase and reduce viscosity. 131 degrees Fahrenheit, 55 degrees Celsius, for 15 minutes to activate protease and reduce haze. 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 66 degrees Celsius, for 45 minutes to activate both beta-amylase and alpha-amylase and produce a variety of sugars. 167 degrees Fahrenheit, 75 degrees Celsius, for 10 minutes to activate alpha-amylase and produce other sugars. Full-bodied moonshine. This is a moonshine that has a thick and sweet mouthfeel, a low alcohol content, and a complex flavor. A full-bodied moonshine can be achieved by using a low proportion of sugar or corn, and by mashing at a high temperature for a short time to produce more unfermentable sugars. A possible step mash schedule for a full-bodied moonshine is 113 degrees Fahrenheit, 45 degrees Celsius, for 15 minutes to activate beta-glucanase and reduce viscosity. 131 degrees Fahrenheit, 55 degrees Celsius, for 15 minutes to activate protease and reduce haze. 158 degrees Fahrenheit, 70 degrees Celsius, for 30 minutes to activate alpha-amylase and produce maltodextrin and other sugars. 167 degrees Fahrenheit, 75 degrees Celsius, for 10 minutes to activate alpha-amylase and produce other sugars. High adjunct moonshine. This is a moonshine that is made from a high proportion of unmalted grains, such as corn, rye, or wheat, that have a low enzyme content and a high starch content. A high adjunct moonshine requires a special step called gelatinization, which is the process of breaking down the starch granules in the grains into soluble starches that can be converted by enzymes. Gelatinization occurs at a high temperature, usually above 170 degrees Fahrenheit, 77 degrees Celsius, and requires constant stirring to prevent scorching. A possible step mash schedule for a high adjunct moonshine is 180 degrees Fahrenheit, 82 degrees Celsius, for 30 minutes to gelatinize the starches in the unmalted grains. 167 degrees Fahrenheit, 75 degrees Celsius, for 10 minutes to activate alpha-amylase and produce sugars. 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 66 degrees Celsius, for 45 minutes to activate both beta-amylase and alpha-amylase and produce more sugars. 131 degrees Fahrenheit, 55 degrees Celsius, for 15 minutes to activate protease and reduce haze. How to increase the mash temperature in steps. The mash temperature can be increased in steps by either applying direct heat to the mash tun or by adding boiling water to the mash. The method of choice depends on the type and size of the mash tun, the availability of heat sources, and the personal preference of the moonshiner. However, some general tips and formulas for increasing the mash temperature in steps are: applying direct heat. This method involves heating the mash tun with a stove, a burner, or an electric element. The advantages of this method are that it is simple, fast, and does not dilute the mash. The disadvantages are that it requires a mash tun that can withstand heat, it can scorch the mash if not stirred constantly, and it can denature the enzymes if overheated. To apply direct heat, the moonshiner should stir the mash constantly and monitor the temperature with a thermometer. Increase the heat gradually and stop when the desired temperature is reached. Be careful not to exceed the optimal temperature range for each enzyme. Adding boiling water. This method involves adding a calculated amount of boiling water to the mash to raise the temperature. The advantages of this method are that it does not require a heat source, it does not scorch the mash, and it can adjust the mash thickness. The disadvantages are that it requires a large pot of boiling water, it can dilute the mash and lower the gravity, and it can be inaccurate if the measurements are not precise. Cheers Moonshine Life Recipes.